Hey everyone, this is Curb and I bring you another deck profile. Today we're going to be taking a look at Avantgarda post set 13. Alright, so we'll go ahead and start off by just talking a little bit about the deck. So I think Avantgarda is, strangely enough, hasn't really moved. I guess I should explain that a little bit more. So the last time I did a deck profile on this, I thought that Avantgarda was kind of like an A-tier sleeper hit kind of deck during the set 12 format. And of course, I did take this to BCS and managed to get 10th place with it. Unfortunately, just missing out on the top 8, but you know, the deck still definitely performed as well as it should. And it is kind of in the exact same spot. So even after BT13, this deck did get enough upgrades to the point where it still kind of is able to maintain its rogue status, and you can definitely steal a lot of games with it. And I will say this deck was built and tested by my deck tester, who actually took this to the first Spring Fest in Ontario, and he managed to go something like X3 or X2. He did actually really well with this in comparison to his other teammates. And so I think this deck definitely is a little bit of a sleeper hit still. It can definitely compete, but you do have to know what you're doing, and you do have to kind of know about playing against the big three and playing in this meta. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and hop straight into the deck profile. Alright, so starting off where we always do with the ride line. So of course we are going to be playing Sora Period as our grade 0. He is a generic D starter, but you do actually have to play him in the ride line because for whatever reason your grade 3 requires him to be in the soul. And then of course we have our grade 1, the Dark Verdict. So when he's rode upon by the grade 2, if you have the grade 0 in your soul, you add a grade 1 strategy card from your deck to your hand. But if you don't add anything, you can't actually pop him out of the soul. A lot of times you're probably not going to be using that skill. 9 times out of 10 you will be able to search. Sometimes you draw into it and sometimes you damage checker, but that doesn't really happen too often. But just remember that if you don't search, you do get a free grade 1 body. And the grade 2 does actually have basically the same skill, because when he's ridden over by a grade 3 Avantgarda, and you have the grade 0 in the soul, you search for a grade 2 strategy order and put it in your hand. And then of course if you didn't search, you get to call him out. This is much less likely to proc than this is, but you know, it does actually happen sometimes. So you got to keep that in mind when playing this deck. And then of course our top end is going to be the original Avantgarda. So he just has one skill, the Act. If you have the grade 0 in the soul, you can choose a strategy or from your order zone and put it into the soul. You get a draw card, he gets 5k, and then he gets the skill that at the end of the battle he attacks. If it hits a Vanguard, or if you Persona Ride, if you Persona Road, I should say, you counterblast 1, discard a card, you get to restand him, but he gets drive -1. So this deck is all about restanding the Vanguard, as I'm hoping that people who clicked on this deck profile know. So you're getting essentially 3 drives per turn. Sometimes you go up to 4, and you're just putting as much pressure as you can. You do technically need to Persona Ride almost every turn. Your first grade 3 turn is probably your weakest because you have to rely on that on hit. But there are definitely a lot of things that you can do when playing the deck to kind of ensure that that hit goes through. Right, so moving on into the main deck, of course, we are going to be starting off with 3 extra copies of Persona Ride. As I said, this deck is super Persona Ride reliant, and thankfully there are actually a lot of ways to get your Persona Ride and to just consistently have it. So Persona Ride on your turn 4 is usually not a problem, and you can typically always get to it. So next up, this might be a little bit controversial, but I think I trust my deck tester in this. He opted to play 4 copies of the Avantgarda Richter. So we do have an FFR, but let's take a look at the base rarity version. So Act in the hand. If your opponent's Vanguard is at grade 3 or greater, you can reveal it and bind your Vanguard, the Avantgarda from your Vanguard, and ride him as stand, and then he gets all the original abilities of Avantgarda. So for all intents and purposes, if you use that skill, he becomes Avantgarda, but instead he gets another skill to add to that. So at the end of the battle he attacks, if you have the grade 0 in the soul, you can discard 2 cards from hand, choose an Avantgarda from your buying zone, write it as stand. It gets -1 and plus 10,000 power. So assuming you Persona Road, which is the only time that you're going to be using Richter, you would Persona Ride. You use usually you want to use his skill to put in one of your orders into the soul to draw the card and get 5k, and then you're going to be binding your Vanguard and rewriting this, and then using this skill to put something into the soul, and of course getting whatever the strategy is. So it is possible to use 2 strategies in a single turn with Richter, and basically get 3 Vanguard swings, because you go 1, since you Persona Road, he has the same skill as Avantgarda, so he restands himself, and then he swings again, and then at the end of the battle, you reride the Avantgarda from the bind zone and get another Vanguard swing. So a total of 4 drive checks there if you get the full combo, which is not too difficult to actually see. What we really do want to be doing is drawing into these, and then we can even like pitch them, call them, because we do have a lot of ways to actually get them back. So the reason we're playing 4 is because my deck tester said that it was very important to actually get Richter off. Personally, I was playing this at 2 or 3. I think 2 before the 50 cards and then 3 after. But as I said, my deck tester really stressed the importance of finding Richter on that grade 4 turn. Like, you don't have to find it exactly on that turn, but if you find it, pitch it. There are ways to get it back, so you just need to have access to it by the time you do that first Persona Ride, because in this meta you do kind of need to have a lot of pressure by the time you get your engines going. I guess you need to be able to close out the game or do significant enough damage to the point where you can stabilize and capitalize on your opponent not being in a good position. And then, of course, for the last grade 3, we are playing 2 copies of the Death Winds, our grade 3 strategy order. So this is the only one that isn't searched out by the ride line, and it is probably one of the best ones. So when it's put into Soul from the order zone, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you choose one of your Vanguards, and it gets the skill that when it attacks, all your front row units get plus 5k. So that is on each swing. So ideally, what you would want to do is on your turn 4, you go into Richter, use Richter's Avantgarda skill to put Death Winds into the soul, so that when he swings it 2 times, you give your front row an extra 5k. Now, when you do re-ride, you do lose that skill because the skill was given to Richter and not the not to you, I guess. So you're basically just getting an extra 10k to the front row with this skill. Alright, so moving on into the grade 2s, of course we do always have to start off with the lady. Of course, her real name is Avantgarda, but basically she is your best attacker and the best searcher in the deck. She just does everything. So on rear guard, when your Vanguard with Avantgarda in its name attacks, it gets 5k until end of turn. So do note that it says Avantgarda and not the original Avantgarda. So when you go into Richter, you swing once with Richter, you swing twice with Richter, you re-ride and swing with Avantgarda again. That is a total of plus 15k to her from those swings, and then add that onto the Death Winds. That is a total of plus 25. So she is typically, if you got full combo off on turn 4, a 35k base unit. And of course, that's not even accounting for boost or Persona Ride, which is just going to make her get even bigger and bigger. But her main skill is that when she's placed on rear guard, if you put a strategy into your soul, you Soul Blast once, search your deck, or drop zone for a strategy card with a different card name, and you add it to your hand. Of course, you shuffle your deck afterwards. So she mainly gets your Death Winds out. Your first turn 3 is put the grade 2 order into soul, use the skill swing, or before you swing, you call her, you Soul Blast out the order, and then you search out the Death Winds for next turn. And then, of course, I think you should... Well, you don't play it that turn. You wait till next turn, and then you play it and use the skill. But like I said, she gets very, very big. 35k base if you have full Richter combo. Assuming you Persona Ride, that's a 45, which is just the best attacker that this deck can honestly muster, and is really nothing to sneeze at. Continue on, we are going to, of course, still be playing the Habitable Zone. So I did consider taking this out a little bit because he doesn't seem as great, because I feel like it's a little bit hard to see cycle cards when you only have 4 in a 50 card deck, but I still think Habitable Zone is definitely a good card. You do amass a ton of soul Unfortunately, that's not until grade 3, which is when this card is not really as great. But the main skill that we actually do use him for is that when he's placed on rear guard, if you Persona Road this turn, you can counterblast 1, you search your deck for up to 1 set order, you reveal it, add it to your hand, and then you can play a total of 2 orders, with the next one being played without the cost. So essentially what this lets you do is refill your order zone, because after you go your turn 4, you tend to have nothing left in your order zone. So having another card that just searches out your orders, it is kind of unfortunate that you can't search from drop. So if you draw into too many of them, this can kind of be useless, but just having the ability to play 2 orders in 1 turn means that you can pull off a Richter during the next turn, turn 5, because Richter typically is going to be wanting 2 orders in the order zone. You can get away with, just 1, but to maximize it, you definitely do want to be having those 2 orders in the order zone. And of course, finishing off the grade 2s, we have put back in Mr. Enlightened Age Dragon. So this is a one of those Persona Rider cards where if you Persona Ride this turn, you can Soul Blast 1 and discard a card. This unit gets set another 5k, so it becomes a 15k attacker. And then you choose a set order from drop and put it in your hand. And then you choose a set order with a different card name, the card you added, and put it in your hand. So this is effectively the same card as kind of Habitable Zone, a little bit worse because it does have to wait till turn 4, but this is effectively doing, as my deck tester told me, this is refueling yourself after your Richter turn, because your Richter turns tend to exhaust all of your orders and you kind of just run out of gas there. He's here to gas you back up for your turn 5 so that you can actually have enough power to finish off the game if you still need to do that. You didn't just sack your opponent out of the game. Anyways, finishing off the grade 2s, we are just playing the 2 copies of the grade 2 order. Now with 50 cards, I think we can totally afford to play 2 copies of Dusting, because it is actually very good, because when Splits his Soul, you choose one of your Vanguards, it gets plus 10k, and your opponent cannot intercept, and they also cannot play any Blitz orders. So this card, if you ever go up against a deck like Sienna, you can just make them cry, because they can't play any other Blitz orders. This also does technically shut down Avantgarda, which you should keep a mindful eye on. It prevents intercepts. There's not a lot of big interceptors right now, but in case that there ever are, this is always going to be pretty good against them. I guess against Ava, but like, who cares about Ava? No one's playing that right now. This is also your best Solon target on your first grade 3 turn, because it gives an extra 10k. If you add that to the 5k that Avantgarda himself gets, that is already at 28. And then with a 10k boost, that's going to be 38, which is going to be your best chance of hitting on that first swing. And then, of course, there is always a chance that a lot of times people will PG your first Vanguard swing. Sometimes the PG they have is Avantgarda, and then if you Dusting, they can't PG it. So they have to take it and let you get the restand. Alright, so moving on into the grade 1s. Of course, we can never play less than 4 Hannah Hathaway. So this card is just absolutely insane. So when he's put on rearguard, if you have a blue Deathstar Vanguard, you counterblast 1 and draw a card. So he's just a card that basically replaces himself. And I didn't really mention it, but your grade 1s and 2s and 3s are all blue Death Stars, so you can always use this skill. So you just slap him down, you counterblast 1, and then you draw a card. So basically you're calling a free unit at that point. And then he has another skill. You're usually going to be calling him behind the Vanguard, because when he boosts, if you put a strategy card into your order zone this turn, which effectively you should be doing every single turn, he gets an extra 2k, so he becomes a 10k booster. And then if he is in the middle back row, you can countercharge 1. So what you want to do on your turn 2 is always see him. You ride into grade 2, you search out the grade 1 order, you play the grade 1 order, you call down Hannah Hathaway, you counterblast 1, you draw a card, and then you boost your Vanguard with Hannah Hathaway, and you countercharge the counterblast that he just used right there. So effectively, this card is on place, draw 1 for nothing most of the time. You just have to have taken 1 damage in order to do that play. Continuing on, we do have a new card from set 13. This is the other, I guess, the technician, the Asgari Milestone. My deck tester always just calls him Milestone. So he's placed on rear. If you have a Blues Death Star Vanguard, you can counterblast 1, choose a grade 3 or greater Avantgarda from your drop, and add it to your hand. So this card is what I was talking about earlier, where you can kind of just pitch your Persona Rides for in case you don't have anything better, like you don't have a Habitable Zone, or you can't really use a Habitable Zone because it's your first grade 1 turn. So he is just there. this allows you to just discard the Richters and then add them back when you actually need them, so that they're not kind of just like bricking up your hand. And of course, he is much better than that because he is actually a 13k unit, because if his strategy card was put into your Aura Zone this card, just like Hannah Hathaway, instead of getting 2k, he gets an extra 5k. So he's a 13k attacker or a 13k booster, which lets you hit those magic numbers. We talked about the lady earlier. She was hitting 35 or 45. Add a 13k boost to that. That is 58 or 48, which are both magic numbers. So he's just an overall very solid card. You don't always want to see him. 2 might be a little bit too little, just because you do want to see him sometimes. He definitely allows you to kind of toolbox your drop zone a lot better than we were ever able to in the deck before. And of course, he's just a really good unit, but if you see too many copies of him and you don't have enough Avantgardas in the drop zone, he can kind of become a little bit of a brick in those cases. And of course, finishing off our grade 1 normal units, of course, we are just playing Cat. Cat is just always going to be really good. In this deck, it's pretty good too. We only play 1 because you can actually only ever use 1, because you always need to keep your grade 0 in the soul in order to actually use your effects. So when he's placed on rear or Guardian Circle, you choose a total of 2 cards that were in your right deck, you put them back into your right deck face up, and then he gets the skill depending on whether he was on rear or Guardian Circle. So on Guardian Circle, he's a 20k shield all by himself, and then of course if you play him from hand onto rear guard circle, you do get to choose a set order from your drop and you re-add it to your hand. So another card that technically is there, allows you to recycle some of those orders that you've put into the soul and then soul blast it out. But most of the time, you're just going to be using him as that 20k shield, because 20k shields are just always going to be pretty good, at least for a while. And then, of course, finishing off the grade 1s, of course, you're just playing the 1 copy of Kill Shroud. If you draw it or damage it, it really sucks, but, you know, it's better than playing more than 1 of this, because this card is not really that great. Because when you put it into the soul, you can choose one of your opponent's rearguards and retire it, and then your Vanguard is another 5k, which is not great. But in case you do actually need to retire an annoying rearguard, it is there as an option, and it's always definitely good to have an extra order than not. So you always want to just have this in your order zone, especially when you get into your Richter turn. You're going to have on your first grade 3 turn, you're gonna play this, and then you're gonna play Dusting, and then you're gonna ride to grade 3, and you're going to put Dusting into the soul, and then your next turn you're going to go into Richter. You're gonna play Death Winds. What you'd want to do is you want to put Kill Shroud into the soul, retire something, and then ride into Richter, and then put the Death Winds into soul. So it does have a lot of utility, and maybe warrants putting up to 2 because it's good to always have access to. But in my opinion, I think that getting the 1 extra deck slot is worth the risk of, you know, kind of whiffing on it. And of course, just finishing off the grade 1s, is of course just going to be PG's Elementario, because, you know, it's still just always going to be really good, especially going into a meta where we're seeing 2 more Stride deck sets. I think you just have to play Elementaria at this point. Alright, so moving on into the trigger lineup, it's going to be pretty basic. We are playing the 4 and 8 crit. Of course, you don't actually have to play the soul in crits. In fact, you should probably just play vanilla crits at this point. You make excess soul. You do not need any soul in this deck. You just have stacks and stacks and stacks of soul. The main reason this is still here is because it's kind of a leftover from my last deck profile from the BCS, when I was kind of worried about Prison, because Prison can actually screw you over if they take out the grade 0 from your soul. It kind of makes it so that you can't play the game. So I was playing this as kind of a last minute defense against Prison, but Prison's not really doing anything right now. If you have a lot of Prison, then maybe you can play this, but I think that if you're playing smart and you know what you're doing, you shouldn't really have a problem keeping at least 2 extra soul in your soul, so that your sword period doesn't get snatched up. And then of course for our 3 of playing the front trigger, your front row units, if they're ladies, are already hitting really big. Why not just make them unguardable? Just too good to not play front, especially since you're swinging Vanguard and getting 3 to 4 drive checks every turn. Just getting a front trigger makes things so much better. Of course, playing the 4 heals, not playing any counter heals. Once again, that is up to player preference. And then just playing the Endo Breath, the auto win button. If you hit this on your first Vanguard swing, you kind of just win the game there. Especially if they like 2 to pass you. I think I've had a game where my opponent goes 2 to pass, flip over OT, okay, give 100 million to this column. My Vanguard is now at 66, breakthrough, and You take 2 damage. Okay, the attack hit. Let me counterblast 1 and restand, and then just swing again for like 66. So always play your auto win button. Alright, so as always, we're going to go ahead and finish off with just a quick test hand. So we've got some pretty good cards here in this opening hand. We've got a copy of each, I almost said Victor, Avantgarda here, so we kind of just do need that, even if we just end up discarding them. This actually got pretty good. We've got 2 Hannah Hathaways, so definitely a lot of good things here. So we're going to go ahead and stand draw. Unfortunately, draw into this, which is actually very bad. We're going to discard the Richter to ride up. And then, of course, we can go ahead and pass. We're going to take 1 damage because we need it for the Hannah Hathaway, drawing into another very bad card there. In this instance, I think we just discard the heal trigger here so that we can ride. We're not going to be able to do anything. We're not going to be able to search anything, but we can still shuffle because you do technically have to search because it's a search up to 1. So we're going to go ahead and do that, but this is not like the worst situation at all. We're going to go ahead and play the kill shot from our hand, which is pretty unfortunate. But we're going to call the Hannah Hathaway and then draw a card. So we have a really good card to discard for next turn. We're going to go ahead and swing 8 and then swing for 20. This is getting counter charge. We're going to go ahead and take 1 more damage here. Unfortunately, losing a lady there, which is not what we really want. Go ahead and draw for turn, discard a habitable zone in order to ride into the grade 3 Avantgarda. Just going to be searching out the dusting first so that we don't draw into it by accident. And then, of course, we're going to be using the habitable zone next. What we're kind of looking for is maybe another copy of Richter for next turn, or hopefully a milestone in order to actually just get the one that's already in our drop zone back, so that we have a bunch of plays for next turn. So unfortunately, we draw into a Persona Ride, which is not ideal. We're going to go ahead and put this in here. Go ahead and slide it into Soul, draw a card. We're going to go ahead and call another Hannah Hathaway, counterblasting 1 and drawing another one. So we got the milestone. So we should be pretty set for next turn. So we're going to swing at the Vanguard for 33. We're going to go ahead and countercharge. Is this 33? No, this is 38. Let's say our opponent is probably going to be PGing this. We get a front trigger and critical trigger, putting all the effects onto our rear guard. Swing at the Vanguard. Let's say our opponent just like attacks into this. Take another damage. That's really unfortunate. Let's guard another attack. Probably didn't need 2 cards to guard there. But in the end, it's not really going to matter because we're going to go ahead and draw for turn. And then we're going to start off with our Persona Ride. Going to use our Persona Ride to draw a card. This is actually not really that great. I'm just realizing, but at the same time, all things can be fixed because we can go Habitable Zone, Counterblast 1, search out the copy of Death Winds, and of course now we can play 2 orders this turn, but unfortunately we're really missing out on the lady to make an ideal board here. That's really all we're missing. If we can manage to get one off of all the draws we have this turn, actually we're going to put the Kill Shroud into Soul to draw a card. We get another Hannah Hathaway, but I think we have to use the Counterblast on the milestone in order to add back the Richter to our hand. We're going to go ahead and bind the Avantgarda to re-ride, and then we're going to use its skill to put this into the Soul and draw another card. I was really hoping to draw into a copy of, Lady there, but there's only 2 left. I'm probably going to drive check one in all honesty here. Can I actually go ahead and use... Yeah, I can use Hannah Hathaway here, but I think I'm going to save it just so that I can countercharge and kind of make sure that I don't get damage denied, because theoretically you can go like this, draw another card, but you would have to boost on the first swing. So we're going to go ahead and swing. The whole front row is getting another 5k from the Death Wind skill, so this is going to be a total of 2333 with its skill. Drive check 1, drive check 2, gonna be another Avantgarda. Jeez, I think we've seen all 3 Persona Roads at this point. Since we Persona Road, we're gonna Counterblast 1, discard a card, just gonna discard another Avantgarda, restand the Vanguard once again, and then swing once again. Front row gets another 5k, so a total of 20k to the front row. This is now at 38, so we're gonna go and drive check 1, a front trigger, so now this is at 48. Of course, using the skill, we do have to discard 2 cards from our hand. Probably just going to discard our 2 lowest shield value cards in order to rewrite the Avantgarda and give it plus 10k and another drive -1. Then we're going to go ahead and swing, boosting to countercharge, drive check 1. I'm going to be Enlightened Age, so theoretically, next turn, if we Persona Ride, we will have access to adding back 2 orders, assuming that we can Soul Blast one of them and put it into the drop, which is kind of unfortunate. What we would need to do anyways. We still have really big swings here. This is at 13, 23 under the Persona Ride, 33 from the front trigger, and then 43 thanks to Death Winds. And then this should be 8k more. It was 33 or 43 before, so this is another 8k in addition to it. Is it 8k? No, it's another 7k higher. So let's see, it was 40. So this is 50. Alright, well, that's going to do it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this deck profile. Don't forget to do all those YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.